Hi everyone, welcome to the new episode of the Prime You series of interviews with top business and technology experts. I'm Dana Kohut, and in this interview episode I had a pleasure to sit and talk with technology veteran, co-founder and CEO at Kentik, Avi Freedman. Kentik has recently announced launching new AI-enhanced platform that will offer new capabilities to their customers and their users, ability to save costs and enable new operational efficiency for organizations across multiple industries and domains. So it's a great interview with lots of valuable insights from Avi. I hope you enjoy our conversation. And if you do, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the Prime You YouTube channel. Stay tuned and enjoy. Avi, it's a great pleasure to meet you. Welcome to the Prime You.
Pleasure meeting you, and thank you for the invitation. Great to talk.
Yeah, likewise. You have a huge library, what I can see behind your back. So many books. So what are all these books about?
These are books from my formative time as a nerd. So from the 80s database and on, and then falling into the Unix rabbit hole. So old O'Reilly books and Solaris and some Windows programs and Netscape navigators back there somewhere too. Novell NetWare, which I didn't use that much, but was an old networking technology. So just reminds me that it's possible to understand everything that lives underneath the clouds that we inhabit. Makes me comfortable.
You've got a solid library, like probably with the time that will be very interesting to kind of see what led to the modern era of internet, of the cloud, right, environments and the infrastructure. Avi, you have tremendous background in technology. You have started a company that is very successful. I could see that Kentik, you have a great customer base, some really big enterprises are happy to use and leverage your technology like GoDaddy, Booking.com, and so on. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about your background and the reason and the inspiration behind starting Kentik.
Sure. So I was very fortunate to get into computers when I was 8 in, 1978. So I'll date myself. That was not very common. Most of my friends were not into computers then. But my father is a doctor who was doing medical research in pulmonology. My uncle was a doctor who was doing medical research in cardiology. In medical AI, and got me into that. And so I had a hobbyist background in the 80s and 90s. As I mentioned, got into Unix pretty young. Worked with, I was not my technology, medical AI before I went to college. And then when I was getting ready to leave Temple University, where I do not have a degree from, there was no way to get internet access. And I had Sun workstations, public access Unix machines, and thought, well, how hard could this be? I'll just add some modems. And I was very fortunate. I worked in my grandparents' manufacturing business, so I had some business experience. But bottom line is there was no way to fail being an internet provider in the 90s. So I was very fortunate. Grew that, got into networking as one of the subspecialties of being an internet provider. And, that passion has followed me. And so I worked at a company called Akamai, which is the largest content distribution network for 10 years. And after I left, some of the people that I had worked with said, how do we run our infrastructure? And I couldn't give them the Akamai technology for that, which we wrote ourselves, and I wrote some of it. So, that's what led to Kentik. I called, dozens of people that ran critical infrastructure, whether it was service providers or web companies or traditional enterprise, and they all said, yeah, we need help. So decided to move out to the Bay Area, start a venture-backed company. It was called Cloud Helix. Now it's called Kentik. We're a couple hundred people, 500 customers, doing a lot of fun and important things, we think.
Yeah, that's a very interesting story. And first, thing that came to my mind, it's a very unconventional kind of career trajectory to someone who was born and raised in a, kind of this dynasty of, like doctors. Usually children, they take the path after their parents. So it's very interesting that you actually took that unconventional path into technology. and solving the networking problems of this.
My mother was a tax attorney, and
Oh,
when I was young, she reminded me frequently that when I was young, was a teenager, I said, I don't want to be a doctor or a lawyer because you guys work too hard. And she was saying that in the 90s as I was working even harder, at my ISP. But if you find something that you enjoy doing, then it isn't work.
of
And I
course.
almost went into medical, whether it was the medical AI or other kinds of informatics, or even, God help me, the old insurance billing coding stuff that people wanted to get me into in the 90s, 80s. Yeah, it's I had 4 or 5 paths to get into the medical side of it, and just was not my passion. So
Yeah, that's great that you actually followed your passion, right? And you made your passion your job, right? But when your passion becomes a job, it's not that much of the job, right? You mentioned AI, right? Right now, AI is transforming every industry, including healthcare, right?
Mhm.
Tax, and so on and so forth. Every industry is being impacted. And I know that at Kentik, you have developed AI-enhanced observability cloud that helps actually all these organizations gain more insights and more observability into their network infrastructure that is so, increasingly growing, right? It's not unified anymore, right? That it was built originally. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about this tool that you offer to the market.
Absolutely. So I'll tell you briefly about Kentik, and then we can talk about AI a little bit. So as you mentioned, networking and infrastructure are getting much more diverse. There are these old things called routers and switches. I have one of them up there. There's the cloud side, there's the internet that you don't control. There's, SaaS vendors and what they do, but if their APIs don't work, then you can't welcome people to your applications because you can't get to Twilio. And the observability world, or before that monitoring, has really ignored the network layer. And so we come at the observability space, and what the way we've always focused is have a SaaS offering, take all the telemetry, answer any question on all of it. We don't do aggregation and summarization. And we've always been with a focus of how do we make this easy to use. So our first users were like, get out of my way. I just want, direct access to the database and just jack into my brain. Then we built workflows and things that help people, sort of guided exploration. And then natural language interface, root cause analysis, all those things are designed to make people more efficient. We're not trying to replace people, but ultimately people want to do what they're hired to do, which is architecture and engineering, and not debugging. And often the network teams, by the time that with classic tools, by the time they're still investigating when the problem's gone away, so it's just a huge waste of time. The AI approach we're taking is, a little bit like, informed by some of my history. It's, absolutely generative AI is amazing. If heard of transformers and LLM and what ChatGPT is doing, and, the others, but there's also the problem of keeping them on guardrails, because a lot of our customers use us, probably half our customers use us to fight denial of service attacks in an automated way.
Mhm.
And if we tell them the wrong things, they could take their customers or partners offline. So to extend that generally to the whole space, we're doing the sort of the old school AI of building a semantic model of the infrastructure universe and combining that with the predictive, generative, amazing magic stuff. It's not as important for just asking a question, but
Mhm.
if you're gonna say maybe I should turn this off or add this or change the configuration, then the generative stuff by itself has a very difficult time. So sort of taking a pre-AI winter semantic approach and combining it with the very modern, last couple of years advances in technology.
There is like organization, they have complex network infrastructure, and they are very often quite happy with their network infrastructure as long as it's like there are no issues. And when issues arise, this is the what they are looking for is to make sure to automate the kind of identification of the issue before they hit the customer. And
Right.
there are a lot of automation has been there already for decades. And the promise of AI is to be able maybe proactively identify the weak link and to be able to I don't know, mitigate the issue. So making sure that provide with the data, the readable data, preferably the readable data that what actually led to this kind of a challenge or the issue with the network infrastructure. Maybe you could provide us with a specific case study, right, where AI helps your customers, right, mitigate the threats, right, in network infrastructure.
So there's generally two areas. One is threats that are more traditional security threats. So um, using AI, we do anomaly detection to say, is there something that has changed that is likely to cause a problem, right? Is this something that is an attack or unusual traffic patterns that have a pretty high confidence that we should show someone? And then you have to have even higher confidence to actually automatically, mitigate and defend. So the volumetric attacks are the areas where it's most common for people to actually engage automated systems, right? So you have your Skynet, complete automation, where that you're being overwhelmed, there's an issue, and you might want to trigger something to fight it automatically. Even so, a lot of our customers still use what we call the big red button, which is they'll get a ticket, they'll get a notification, and there'll be a URL. A human will look at it first, and then we've set it up so they just click and go, okay, this is what I'm going to do. So it's option A, option B, option C, like choose your own adventure. Um, then there's on the traffic engineering and performance side, um, things that sometimes can actually be not a new thing that has started, but something even has stopped, right? There's some application that its traffic has gone away. Okay, well, that's an important application. I need to go take a look at it. Or there's new applications that are in this data center that really shouldn't have been, or that are talking to my cloud region or between clouds. And so all of those are applications of anomaly detection where we also try to understand what does it mean and then make recommendations about what to do. So if you think about case studies, as I mentioned, about half our customers do some sort of automated, whether it's big red button or completely closed loop, fighting a denial of service attack. Probably a third of our customers do that with sort of data center and cloud application traffic to say, hey, there's something weird going on here. This is probably a misconfig, or this is probably an attack type thing. And then we have a performance testing product line where trying to understand, what is the performance and what might it be if you did something different, where we can say, hey, you're having a performance problem. Maybe you should, change the traffic engineering to be a certain way. You might get better performance from that cloud region. So when in Kentik, the way we configure things is to be more like 85% chance that it's going to be something actionable and interesting. In the more security realms, the goal is to generate as many alerts as possible and have other systems figure it out. But our customers are more sensitive because we could be waking someone up, or if they have a network operations center, it's something that's interrupting their workflow. So we have to have pretty high confidence that there's an issue.
So how specifically does the AI component in your platform brings the more value to your customers?
So historically, we've used machine learning techniques to do the anomaly detection, which is, broadly considered an area of AI. In the last couple of years, we've been focused on adding two areas from a technology perspective, and then I'll talk about the application of that. One, from a technology perspective, is the generative models and their ability to help people translate from natural language and produce insights and predictions about what might be about to happen, which is not quite anomaly detection, but is pretty similar. So like many other companies, we have a co-pilot coming, which is being able to interact in natural language with the product. But our big focus has been how do we do even better than anomaly detection and getting towards the root cause analysis, which is to say, we think you have a problem. Here's what the reason is. Longer term, then to actually suggest and take action. In the infrastructure world, you can break people's Zoom if you get it wrong. So, we're doing step by step. And then in addition to the generative side, as I mentioned, um, building a semantic model of what it is that how things actually work and combining those, which is a different approach to how many companies are working. Because the generative models by themselves, while they can produce very interesting insights, they have no idea whether they're correct or not. They're not actually thinking. In French, computer is ordinateur, which is like thinker and or thinking, thing. And in Hebrew, it's machshev, which is also like a thinker. But the LLMs, these models are not actually thinking in any sense. They're just predicting. You put a bunch of stuff in and they give you some stuff out. So combining it to say, does this make sense? Could this be real? A recommendation that won't damage things is the approach that we're taking, with the goal to get, which is not with this release of our platform, the goal to get to that automated remediation that everyone wants to do. In network world, there's a lot of hype about automation and closed loop networks and self-driving networks. And the truth is today that's done in very limited scenarios like wireless offices, Wi-Fi for offices, or, Wi-Fi in carrier networks, or very small constrained data centers. No one's really doing that broadly. And, we need to be careful as we roll out to that. So short term, it's the machine learning techniques, adding the generative AI, semantic models, bringing all that together to surface the right insights, let people interact and iterate with the product in natural language, and do better at showing them, here's what you should be focusing on. So we save them time and they can do what they were hired to do, which is, build better infrastructure.
So that is the troubleshooting is one of the components, right? One of the promises of your tool. I know that another one is managing the costs, right?
Mhm.
And it's another
Yeah.
big topic for every enterprise, right? The network infrastructure costs can be huge. I read some of your articles, how you actually demonstrated how you've been able to slash the expenses for the network infrastructure. So maybe you could elaborate on that a little bit more as well.
Sure. Yeah, as you mentioned, troubleshooting, cost, security, performance, those are sort
Yeah.
of four big pillars of use cases. On the cost side, if you're in the cloud, it's very easy to fire stuff up and have it communicate in the wrong way. In fact, if you want to be what's called HA, highly available in the cloud, you need to communicate between cloud regions, which isn't free. The network transfers is very costly. You can look at Cloudflare has done some great work, showing people how expensive that can be. So whether it's from the cloud to the internet or cloud to cloud or within a cloud, but to multiple regions,
Mhm.
people can have tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars a month of bandwidth cost. And so Kentik, that's a core use case for us. Another interesting cloud use case is from cost perspective, not just the network, it's looking at the network traffic to say, why do I have all this infrastructure on that's not talking to anybody? It's not doing anything. I have this, maybe you should crank it down in CPUs and memory and disk, or maybe you should just turn it off temporarily. So figuring out whether it's consolidation or is this part of my cloud estate still active? The network isn't the only signal for that, but it's a big one. And then beyond the internet, we have some people that are some of the very largest users and builders of internet on the planet as customers. And then, they do a lot of that work to say, how should I optimize my traffic? Where should I put capacity? And for service providers, is this customer profitable? Because I can look at what part of my infrastructure they're using. For us, it's more about sort of cloud, enterprise, data center, WAN, but we still have a lot of that internet-centric use case on the cost side as well.
Yeah, I got the so when you mentioned that there are like lots of so transferring data between clouds, right? It can be super expensive,
Mhm.
right? Or transferring the data to the data center and back to the cloud, right? To the user and so on. So all of this takes a lot of traffic and at the same time can be very costly.
Yeah.
So the solution that if I got you right, it can be looking closer on the network and looking the points that can be like problematic, like maybe there are some parts that need consolidation, so the network infrastructure is inefficient and has to be consolidated. I know that VMware has, like, I've been working at VMware for a while now, and it offers, like POPs, points of presence that also that are deployed closer to the cloud, and also allow the shorten this data traffic.
Mhm.
So what, if I understood you correctly, is this the consolidation, or there are other components that help?
That's one of the elements, is how can you run the network more efficiently for the network traffic you have. Another is determining network traffic that shouldn't be, right? So if you have a database syncing between Ukraine and Saskatchewan, and you don't really need to do that, because maybe it should be syncing to your own data center, because it can be very expensive to do that cloud to cloud or just from cloud externally. Maybe you have direct connections between your corporate infrastructure and cloud, but you're actually going out the internet to get back into another side of your network. So that's a kind of optimizing the network traffic, or it might be the applications are communicating in a way that is costing you too much money, and you should change how the applications are sending their traffic. So the network traffic can point you to reconfiguring the network, or actually changing your application patterns that drive that network traffic. It could be either or both of those things. So
I got this. So optimizing network infrastructure can also lead to a lot of operational efficiency for their enterprise, right? And cut
certainly performance as well, right?
performance.
Because
Yeah, it can be
if
business critical application, and if there is any delay or jitter, right, it can all impact. If we talk about, I don't know, the financial institution, the financial industry, or healthcare, that all can have the dramatic impact on the business, right? So that's all extremely important to look at closer.
Yeah. And a lot of these use cases are very integrated between, sort of the troubleshooting, the performance, the attack and security side, the cost optimization. A lot of them wind up being the same group that has multiple tasks, or allowing groups to work together in the enterprise. Because when there's an issue, is it an application problem? Is it a network problem? Is it a cloud problem? Infrastructure problem? Figuring that out quickly can impact productivity, can impact revenue of the company. Those performance and security issues have real impact.
Okay, so is it only the figuring out what is actually causing, or also at the same time solving the problem, like rerouting the traffic, or reprioritizing, or prioritizing some applications that have the business impact?
So today, if you look at the whole industry, there's actually very little. There's a lot marketed around this automated remediation. There's very little of it actually happening outside of different areas. As I said, you might have a wireless controller, Juniper or Juniper Mist, that looks at how to configure the access points. You might have something in a very constrained data center topology that does a little bit of remediation. Most of it is recommendations and then humans still today. So our goal, and our roadmap this year is making those recommendations even more deeply than in some of the areas that we've built up a lot of expertise around attack and performance. So for more of these, sort of prioritize this or add some capacity here. But I don't think that we or the industry generally is going to be magically self-driving and no humans in the loop anytime in the next couple of years in the infrastructure space broadly. And so my message to those that are looking at the marketing from other vendors and feeling like they're behind is, you're not behind.
Okay, yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah.
Recommendations are the first step. Recommendations are a good first step, but we still need human expertise very much in 2024.
So technology could be the recommendation part, and humans as executors of, right? And there should be still a human element to execute on the recommendation, and maybe, applying some expertise and experience in networking.
Absolutely. And there's absolutely automated work being done, as I said, more around attacks and things that are very clear that things just can't happen. But we show people, hey, you're about to violate your bills and cost another 50,000, but what you do about that can actually be very nuanced depending on your goals, which can be hard to describe to the computer. So I don't know whether we'll ever completely automate that, even though people use us regularly to automate their bills, to correlate their bills and make sure they're being billed properly and detect whether they might have a problem. On the other hand, as you mentioned, rerouting traffic, saying this has priority, that's something that absolutely, we might be making recommendations about, and people might trust enough to, integrate. My guess is the series of recommendations that we're rolling out this year will take a little bit of time for people to get comfortable with before they push the button, before they stop using the big red button and hook the systems up together, Skynet style. So
Why is that so? Why do you think it takes time people to get used to this new kind of technology?
well, because if we get it wrong, um, Zoom doesn't work and the revenue of the company stops. And you can actually lock yourself if you get the recommendations wrong about how to configure the infrastructure, you can lock yourself out of the ability to actually get back in and fix it. So you can have some very bad situations. In fact, if you look at some of the biggest cloud outages that have happened, that are not network outages, they're storage outage, compute outage, they're from automation gone wrong. They're from someone, the system automatically deploying very fast. When I grew up, you could type a horrible command that would destroy the system and go, oh, and hit Control C and stop it, and the computer was still thinking about it. Nowadays, all this happens very fast, very distributed. I'm not saying that we shouldn't continue driving to automate, but people do need confidence that the system understands what to do, which is why we're bringing in some of that semantics. Semantic just means sort of what does it mean? How does this connect it to each other? To add to the generative stuff so that we can be a check and balance. I really don't like um, I don't think hallucination is the best word to describe what happens when generative AI, predictive AI goes wrong, because it's not really thinking to hallucinate. But the net result is it is generating something that isn't really tied to reality. So our goal is make sure that all the recommendations are tied to reality, and then that increases the chance that people will be willing to push the, complete automation loop. Um, so, and I think that the people that are going to move farthest in that automation are going to be the ones that are focusing on specific problems areas like cloud interconnectivity or the security of these things, or, or applications that are sort of left running that should be shut down, all those things. As I, said, the general AI, we're not quite there yet in terms of being able to completely automatically run everything.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. There has been a lot of, like conversation around generative AI and AI, like a lot of innovations are being pushed and so
Yeah,
on,
it's amazing and great.
right?
It's I'm not saying it's not. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, what is your take on that? Like, so like a lot of professionals and a lot of tech experts, they say we need these guardrails around AI, right? Though we still see a lot of potential for the technology. What is your take on that? Where does the technology take us, and how do we make sure that it does not violate, or does not collapse the systems as we used to them?
I don't I think that we need guardrails to make sure that we don't cause bad automation. And I think that we as people need to discuss, just as we talk about should we have a minimum wage, how much should it be? How do we want to use this technology in the workplace? Generally, I think that it can be used to make us humans more productive, and that with Wikipedia and Khan Academy, if people are privileged enough to be able to, have a safe and quiet and environment with enough food and healthcare, we're actually in a world where you got the information at your fingertips, and this kind of technology can be very helpful. How we want to, apply that in work, that's a sort of social policy question. Since the 80s, maybe early, actually really earlier, when people started writing about what would happen with AI. I mean, there's, certainly earlier than that, Asimov with the laws of robotics, but, certainly by the time cyberpunk came along and people started thinking about the singularity, there's been a lot of misconception. There's been the they thought that if you just put computers on a network, they will achieve sentience. Like that's not happening. But how these technologies get used and how you connect them up to the real world, those are real questions. I think that we have to be, so I don't lose sleep about, Skynet coming and wanting to kill us all. But I think they're legitimate questions. How do we want to use the technology and mesh humans in? There's other things that I worry about more than that. I think we're going to see more net benefit than risk of AI, certainly the next 5 years.
Yeah, I like the how you put this. So actually, like from my personal perspective, I do see generative AI as the opportunity for humans, for us, for humans being more creative and focusing on creating, generating great ideas, right? And using this technology to maybe shape these ideas, right? And making sure, so spending less time on some repetitive task or something mundane that is time consuming.
But we do have to educate people, and this is not new, but if you think about Wikipedia, if you think about even, sort of the the agitprop, on Facebook, I mean, all this stuff, ultimately we need to train people to have a good bullshit detector. I mean, bottom line, right? And AI makes that more imperative, even greater. But before AI, you go to social networks, you go to Wikipedia, you go to, news sites. It's even more important, certainly more important than it was even 30 years ago, that you be able to say, does this is this written from the perspective of, having an agenda? Is this something that I should trust, not trust? Those are things that become even more important. And, because it's going to become even easier to fill the internet with crap, which is certainly something that is happening with AI. So you need to be able to navigate and detect, and those things are important. And then on the other side, though, I don't think humans are going to be replaced at being creative, at doing the direction, at building companies, at connecting the world, at innovating in science. And AI can be a great tool for that. What we need to make sure of is that there's an equal playing field for people to have the opportunity to be participating in that world. Because if not, that's where you can get some of the dystopian scenarios.
Yeah, and the critical thinking part and education that becomes more and more challenging, right?
That's a better way of saying critical thinking is better than bullshit detector. That's
Yeah, so Avi, from your perspective, like you have this like background of so many books, and like right now we have such a short span of attention, like of children and young adults, right? So many would find this like, oh my God, how can you spend?
I'll show you this. This is the Handbook of AI,
uh,
Volume 3 from 1982. So
82?
people have been at it for quite some time. And yeah, I mean, I've always been an infovore. There's a movie, Short Circuit, where there's a computer, a robot that becomes, an infovore. But AI is going to help us summarize, keep track of things that are interesting. I think again, ironically, it'll help us keep track of the things that we think are interesting, and help us learn if we use it properly.
Yeah, and do you think that right now it's like more of a gold rush, and those who come prepared, they can benefit the most, right? So once you are able to uh, see and understand how you can use it to, I don't know, to maximize the benefits of your customers, growing your business, that is something that is going to give you a huge leverage in the tech world.
Absolutely. There's a lot of comparisons right now of AI to crypto,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
But, with crypto, an awful lot of things that were, advertised as blockchain really could have been done with, I'll go nerd, a very tiny database, with an API on a couple cloud regions. Didn't need, distributed signing and ledgers and decentralization and all that. Um, and so, there's a lot of like, search for application of the technology. With especially the generative AI, I mean, even before generative AI, in anomaly detection, machine learning has been applied for decades in a very productive way to help save people time. In the generative AI sense, absolutely being able to interact in natural language, it gives people the ability to do that without having to read those old books from, 70s, 80s, 90s and fire up exotic technology and try to figure out how to do that. Because the predictive stuff is very helpful. So I think it's more than that. I think there absolutely is a lot of, you said gold rush, right? If you can learn about the technology, if you can find interesting ways to apply it, which humans are needed for, that's great. The corollary is if you're not working to bring some of those techniques in to achieve some of the benefit for your customers, you're going to be falling behind because most companies are, even if they weren't thinking about it 3 years ago. So I think it's important at least to be keeping up, and in the tech field, of course, innovating and staying leading edge.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very strong point. And where do you can you foresee where AI takes companies like Kentik in the time span, let's say 3 to 5 years? I've noticed that there are so many companies in the space that you are working, right, in your industry. And recently, I've attended Asdivan and Sassi Summit in Paris. I could see that Kentik was among the sponsors of the event, right? And I
Yeah.
could see lots of companies in this space. So how do you think that AI can benefit and take further the business, right? You said that it can yeah.
Yeah. So, you mentioned something earlier, which is data, and the advantage of data in AI. And that's something that is a mixed bag for us because a lot of the data that we have is our customers' data, and we can't really use it across customer. We can't use it at all across customer. But how people interact with Kentik and what workflows they do and what they like and don't like, that's data that we can use and train on. And so while I said that the state of the art is not complete automation of the whole infrastructure this year, in the 5-year time frame, I absolutely believe that Kentik will be leading our customers to say, not only here, you wake up and it says, here are the problems that I fixed for you. Now, obviously, we'll have to integrate with other systems and whatever the orchestration systems and all that is, but I can see that that's going to be the case, and that we'll have enough customer interaction, go through that phase with a big red button where they get the confidence in it. And that's definitely the world that people are looking for. From our perspective, it's really interesting because if you look at the largest folks in the observability space, they don't really understand what networks are. So they're focusing on the application side, which is great because that's a very important part. But our strategy and belief is that we'll be partnering with those folks. We already partner with folks like New Relic and Sumo Logic and some other folks in the space. And some of the folks, hopefully we'll be partnering with everybody because none of them are really focusing on that network infrastructure, whether it's internet, whether it's your own network, whether it's cloud. They can see some of it, but they're not trying to do, especially on the AI and remediation side. It's just not their area of focus. It's not their users. So I think it puts us in a great position to make our people happy and integrate them with these other systems, because ultimately the business doesn't care about the application or the network or just the security. It's the whole thing together that makes the packets and the applications and the revenue flow. So definitely very excited for the next 5 years. I think, when I ran my ISP, my internet provider in the 90s, it was like you wake up every day and something else is different. And, who would have thought that people would have IP addresses at home and websites and all this stuff. And I think technology is moving at that pace too. And SaaS and observability as well. So it's a great time to be innovating and working with our customers.
It's a great note to end on. Avi, thank you so much for your time. It's been a great pleasure to sit and talk to you.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to talk to someone that has a great bookshelf as well. And
Yeah, mine still has to grow, looking at yours, it's super impressive. Yeah.
I actually have a storage area full of science fiction books and computer science books and magazines from when people were, the 70s and 80s, when people were trying to figure out what computers could be useful for. So as you said, it's sometimes useful to go back and see how things evolved. because, sometimes we live up here, and so, it can be helpful, but, or at least inspiring. But thank you. And thank you for, staying up, not super late, but, going into
My
early.
pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you so much, Avi.
Absolutely.